participants. I'm able to
Yeah,
see
we have
Vladimir, Alvaro, Jacinto. Yeah. So the very quick defreeze. How do you feel? That's it. How do you feel about today's session? Yep. Would Vladimir want to go first?
Yes, sure. So I feel still excited because I feel like that the lean and TOTS is really complementary with what we do in Adizes. So looking forward to wrap up today. And of course, I feel like it's just the first baby steps, and we need to do more studies based on this introduction by Daryl. Thank you. Daryl, you next.
I feel good today, and I'm looking forward to closing it out, and would be interested in any suggestions or feedback you guys may have. Cinto?
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be with you this morning. I apologize to not be able to be with you the last two sessions, but I already see the video for session 2 and the PowerPoint presentation for the third one. Very excited to be wrapping this course and hopefully sharing some experience, recent experience that I had with this topic. Who's next? Seiko.
Hello to everyone. I'm ready too. Last time I was absent. I was working with my clients in Bosnia. Now I'm ready. Who's next? Alvaro.
Good morning, everybody. How are you? I just got back from a couple of days meeting in Chapala with the team. Very happy to be here and ready to go.
Great. Anybody else?
So I was there. I'm here, and I should have done my defreeze first. But anyway, it's good to be back, and I'm really happy I'm able to connect because I am in a very low network zone, and somehow I'm able to get this network. It's as if the serendipity. So good to be here. I'm looking forward to this session. Daryl.
Thank you. So I put it on record, and I may have tripped up Jaime because I sent him an email, and he may be wondering because I never released the show. So my bad. But hopefully I didn't throw him off too much. Maybe he'll watch the video. So what we're gonna try. Somebody needs to mute. I'm thinking, Sridhar, it might be your mic. Could you mute?
Yeah.
And if you have a question, just turn it back on. So when we opened up, excuse me 1 second. When we opened up in the very beginning, I mentioned we would be covering Lean, Six Sigma, and theory of constraint. And that's what we're going to do. In addition, I have one tool that I have sanitized that I'm going to send you guys in the final phase, control. Rather than cover anything about control, I am going to send you guys an Excel spreadsheet that really is a synopsis, a real-time tool that you use as if you were going to deploy and roll out Lean Six Sigma in the manner I've shared it with you guys in the last few weeks. And I thought that I would talk to that Excel spreadsheet and then send it out to you guys at the end of today. And so what I've done was in line with what I pretty much suggested we would do, which was let's cover a bit about Lean. Couldn't cover all the topics in Lean, but some of the main things. Ridding ourselves of waste, make the process flow, and so on. In Six Sigma, we talked about, attacking variation and the problem that variation introduces to any type of a continuous performance improvement effort, including change management. In this session today, we're going to dive into the theory of constraint. But we're going to take an approach for theory constraint that blends in the ideas of Lean and Six Sigma to a degree. And if I have enough time, I have one more set of slides that I sent you, which is really sort of a tour de force, a very fast wrap up and review of what we just talked about in the last 3 weeks. Okay, so, I might be guilty of trying to add too much in, but I just thought for your guys taking your Saturday morning and spending it with us and me, I just want to give you as much value as I can. And if you had any questions after these 4 sessions, shoot me an email and we can talk about those things. Okay, so with that, we're going to go into the theory constraint. So in this session, I'm going to give you a primer on 5S. 5S is technically a lean concept, and I didn't get a chance to really delve into it. I suggested you guys go watch the Boeing Corporation 5S clips. I don't know how many people did that. Did any of you guys do that? Anybody go watch the Boeing clips? Anybody?
Yeah, I did.
Cool. All right. So, but I decided to add a primer on this just to kind of, because I think it's relevant to how a theory constraint is employed. We're going to apply the theory constraint 5 focusing steps, which are the key elements in the theory constraint. There's a ton of material on theory constraint, just as there is a ton of material throughout the internet and on YouTube on both the other methodologies. We want to leave this understanding how lean thinking concepts, as well as Six Sigma, but primarily lean thinking concepts of flow and pull, kind of integrate in the framework of theory constraint. And that's a relevant thing. And then demonstrate using appropriate tools and techniques how to improve a process. So we're going to attempt to do all of that. And if you guys have questions, please, as always, just stop me along the way. So the primer on 5S. 5S in the visual workspace. One of the things, the reason I thought let's slide this little bit of a lean lecture into this theory constraint is the whole idea behind the visual workspace. So visual workspace is when anyone can walk into a place, a building, a warehouse, whatever, and visually understand the current situation within seconds, okay? They see signage, they have posters, they have placards, they have anything and everything that let an unknowing person just entering the building for the first time, the building is informing them as to where to go for this, that, or the other. This concept is known as visual workspace. Connected to visual workspace, right, are the concepts of 5S. And 5S is made up of it was 5 Japanese words and a loose translation of some kind. In English, they came out to be this, okay? So one is for sorting things out, right? So first, when in doubt, throw it out. So in a workplace, be it an office or particularly for a manufacturing plant, I've been to China and saw a ball bearing plant so clean you could damn near eat off the floor except for the smell of the oil. But you could look at the place and realize it's greasy, and as many shavings they may have had in the past. This was a Japanese plant being completely run by a Chinese organization because their standard work was so definitive, so good, no matter where they would put their plants down, Indonesia, United States, China, they had the same repeatable processes and they could make that plant hum and keep it as clean as possible. One of the things I noticed when I first walked in the plant was how clean this ball bearing plant was, right? And ideally, you can't see that one word there, but it says separate unnecessary. Separate the unnecessary. I don't know why it came out like this on the slide, but anyway, separate the unnecessary is a hard word to read. And you use daily, weekly, monthly. Those are things that you are using all of the time. You separate that, you separate the necessary from the unnecessary. Things that are outdated, unused, defective, or you just put them in the corner and for 3 months, no one knew why that stuff sits over there. These are the kinds of things that fall into the category when you're attempting to do something. You want to sort it out, okay? And there is a method. So I mentioned to you Kaizens before. or rapid improvement event. So when you're doing a rapid improvement event, oftentimes you'll have one event to make the process flow. So 6 people will be addressing flow. So let me back up a little bit. So you've decided in a value stream analysis, you know, the thing we do first at the top, the SIPOC I mentioned, you decided in that the priority value stream is the value stream in which we build the 777. Okay, that line is our number one line. And we now are going to attempt a series of rapid improvement events, a series of Kaizens, a series of improvement initiatives, whatever you want to call it. Usually, that means one team is addressing 5S. Get this place together, make it look like it ought to look, make it shine, sorted, and everything in its place. So that's one team addressing the physical space. And oh, by the way, there are 5S initiatives that also take in blocks of times and tell everyone, clean up your desktop on your computer, extraneous files, reorganizing your email files and all of that. So people will just take a chunk of time as a group and collectively decide this is going to be the taxonomy. This is how we will view our desktops in this organization. So it's a bit prescriptive maybe. You could go overboard with this stuff. But the point is that once a value stream has been targeted, you usually will have 4 types of Kaizens going on simultaneously. One is 5S, get this physical space in order, including in instances of knowledge workers, desktops. 2, you will have some team working on flowing the process, the whole thing we did with the lean flow process, right? 3, you will have a team reviewing policies and all the things that it takes to make sure that there's standard work going on at all times. And then the 4th one you could look at for improvement along the lines of quality, cost, and schedule, something like that. So, but when the 5S Kaizen, a team is together, they're going to go through a whole place and they're going to quickly tag. This is the technique they're using, okay? They quickly tag in some manner, shape, or form. Tag an item you infrequently use, will not need it in a next week or month. You just tag it red. This is a team that works in a place and they're going to go around and tag stuff. Then they're going to tag some stuff with a yellow. Say, okay, we're not sure about this. Is anybody using this? Does anyone care that we throw this out or not? And then you're going to tag things green. These are things we have to use on a weekly, monthly basis, and we all know this, right? And you tag it. So it's a bit of a quick tag. These were the simplest Kaizens to take care of. And the thing about a 5S Kaizen is it's a quick win. It makes people feel better that, this place looks good now. So straighten is the next S. Determine the location and needs for items. Consider how to store equipment and supplies. Consider principles of motion efficiency. So going back to the physical waste of motion, where I'm moving around too much. When you do a 5S, you consider straightening things up so that everything has a place and everything is labeled. You use color coding strategies of different kinds. You lay out classrooms and areas in a certain way. Essentially, it's straightforward, straighten the place up. After you've cleaned it up and thrown away things that are extraneous and useless and taking up space, making people's minds cluttered in the process. Another illustration on straighten. Shine. Now, you've sorted it. You straighten the stuff out. And now you need to determine what needs to be clean, who is responsible for getting that done, how will it get done, and what is needed to make sure that the tools and the methods and all the things you're doing, that the persons involved know what's expected of them. And so now you're kind of polishing up the place. There's a great movie on this recently that came out about the founder of McDonald's. It was interesting because one of the brothers was really, really naturally like a 5S straight and organized person. He came from the military, I think. Anyway, the movie is great because it illustrates naturally how some people think this way. Some people are just not this way, but a lot of folks are and are frustrated when workplaces and like this. So,
Daryl,
yes.
Are you thinking about the scene with the tennis court?
The scene,
or that's more of like the design part.
Where are you at right now? Are you talking about?
I'm thinking about the movie The Founder, the movie you're talking about.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
So you're thinking sort of like the scene where the tennis court and he's standing up and he's rearranging and reshuffling people making sure they're optimizing movements and everything.
Yes, I'm thinking of exactly that. Right. That is the good illustration. And he didn't call it 5S, but that is exactly it, Alvaro. That's it. The way he showed how you need to move. You notice he was minimizing movement because people were crisscrossing one another, and he specified the lane in which they ought to walk. Remember, and so that the minimum movement of the guy using the frying French fries, he optimized the space. That is 5S. Optimize the space. So that's a very good.
What's the name of the movie?
It's called The Founder. It's called The Founder.
What's the name of the movie?
It's called The Founder.
The Founder.
Yes.
Got it.
Okay. And so that's a good point. That's exactly what I was thinking. Thanks. I will point out that scene. It's a great movie, guys, and illustrates this stuff like naturally. He was doing it in the 50s before it became a thing, but that business model helped them to become the McDonald's of today in many ways. So sustainment, on slide 10, on sustainment, you see here, this board is being used, and this is called a Kanban, which is a Japanese word for means to organize the work plan type of thing. Anyway, daily boardwalks, so people coming in, not only are things straightened and polished up and shine, then there's a sustainment piece of this. And you'll see later on why I believe I needed to kind of insert this 5S piece into this theory of constraint. Because seeing where the constraint is an important idea. Okay? And then as you go through shining things up, you could see the differences in one workspace prior to it being 5S. And then you systematize. Okay, we have this now. We got all this stuff taken care of. We've done this. We've done 2 or 3 of these events. All right, how do we maintain this? Well, one of the things we did in systematizing, and it always only had the one example, but it's a good 9-10 year example. One of the things we do to systematize is we would fly flags once a month, and on that day, everyone was notified in the organization of 2,000 people. This is a day in which you take 2 to 4 hours to 5S your work environment. So if you've never done it before, you've not ever done a Kaizen because you didn't buy into the whole lean thing the command was using, all right, you got multiple opportunities. And at that point, it's incumbent upon the chain of command in the regular organization to make sure people who ought to have been doing 5S, as managers walk around and see how their places look, are either directed on that day or strongly suggested on that day, you need to clean this place up. And that was one way we did it. And arm twisting is not the way to do it, but if you give them an opportunity to say on the first Thursday of the month or the last Friday of the month, take a half a day, take 2 hours, get your place together, including the insides of your drawers and all of that. And then you sustain that as you systematize, and then you seek to make sure it's communicated. Like we would fly the flag we had a lean flag. We'd throw up the flagpole, and that was 5S day, and so on and so forth. So you systematize and you sustain it that way. So with that, these are some examples, organization. It helps. So I'm going to go right into the theory of constraint analogy. So theory of constraint experts see processes and systems as change. So when they walk into a place or they are involved with a process improvement, they are looking at things and seeking right off the bat for the weakest link. Much in the same way lean flow processes look and have a conversation about where are the most challenging areas for waste. So theory of constraint takes the chain analogy and applies the concept of speed and pace, which are a component part of understanding constraints. And the slowest vehicle in the convoy sort of sets the pace. All right. When a constraint, now critical path, let me point out 2 things. Theory of constraint had 2 veins. One was operations in general, right? You think of the holistic approach of Adizes, it's dealing with the whole company. In many ways, theory of constraint had a holistic idea on the concept of operations, much in the manner Lean did, but from a different point of view. But in addition, theory of constraint engaged a complete treatment about project management, which Lean never really took on, neither did Six Sigma, but theory constraint had two strong pillars of an approach. It sought to optimize critical path chains in its form of project management kinds of approaches, as well as looking for those weak links in your normal day-to-day operations. And I thought that was an interesting thing. So here I would normally play the video for understanding flow and pull. And it's old, but this video was based on the book from 1984 by Iliad Goldratt, and it's still viable. But I'll give you guys the synopsis. If you get a chance to watch it, it's like a novel, you know. Instead of just being a business book, it reads as a story. And I'll synopsize the main parts of the story for you guys. How many of you guys are really familiar with it? I don't want to waste your time. Everybody seen it? Okay, so you guys got the fact that the guy's family as well as his work were being strained by his need to clean up the plant where he was assigned to work. Okay, so I'll spare you that, but normally, you know, in a class setting, I would have played at least an excerpt from that. But I think you guys all kind of have the general idea. So the 5 focus steps related in the context of what we've been talking about. So your efforts at steps 2 and 3 may not require you to do step 4. And I have from the video, how did they identify the constraint? Right? They look for whip, which is why I kind of included the 5S. To see the whip, they wanted to make sure it was visible. So in the video, the guy instructed him. And then when he was hiking with his kids in the mountains, the little guy, Herbie, was the slowest one. They kept taking stuff out of his backpack to make him, you know, they put him in the front of the line. They subordinated every other kid in the pace that those kids walked to the slowest kid so they could all stay together. Right? And from the video, how did they go about subordinating constraint? At the plant, that one machine, which was the slowest one, they made all the cells go at that pace of that machine. They even decided at some point in the video, okay, we've fully exploited constraint. Now, you know, we now need to see what we could do to improve that output of the constraint. And they went and found an old machine and put it in parallel with that machine to maximize that capability more even. In a lot of ways, theory of constraint is about optimizing your capacities. You know, I mean, it's so relevant to manufacturing, but there is a lot of usefulness even in knowledge work environments. But it really it swims in a manufacturing or industry, heavy operations kinds of things. And then during the hike, Herbie set the pace for everybody. So one of the concepts, any questions, you guys? Is the pace okay? Are we all right? Okay.
All good.
Good. All right. So drum buffer rope, big concept. This is drum buffer rope is to theory constraint as workflow. 5S is to lean. You know, the whole idea. These are some of the main concepts once that constraint has been exploited. So the drum is a scheduling of the system to run at a speed of the constraint. And a lot of times folks will say, you know, you got to slow up to speed up, you know, you got to slow down to speed up type of thing. So in this instance, it certainly feels like, okay, we're going to slow everything up here, but you're never going to get to your customer demand if in fact the variation introduced by the constraint to slow and stop and halt and frustrate. And, you know, when you add the human dimension to it, people are just upset. Bosses are pissed off. Workers feel less than because this constraint that no one has exploited properly is just making a bad situation worse. Thus, having a need to see the constraint, make it visible is important. And then you apply these drum buffer rope concepts. So the buffer is an allocation. once we have a constraint, one of the concepts in Lean is to get rid of work in process, WIP. WIP is bad. However, when you have a constraint, is an instance where WIP is useful because you want to stack that WIP up in front of that constraint to make sure it never is without an input, given that fact it's already the slowest component in the process. And the rope is the mechanism that allows the system inputs to be inserted at an appropriate time to support efficient use for the overall system. So more definitively, okay, the speed, a drum is the speed at which the constraint performs. That is, you're not going to get beyond or below that, okay? So the buffer is a safety stock to account for process variation. This is a way to sort of, in a poor man way, address variation that is introduced into the system by the constraint. And so that you never want the constraint, like, we're going swimmingly well, but somehow, way, shape, or form, we don't have things flowing through the constraint. That should never be the case. It should be maxed. And when I say max, there's this concept, we won't delve into it here, known as utilization rate. Normally, you want your entire operation, the capacity of your entire operation to be pushing somewhere around 75 to 80% of capacity. And that's how operational research experts would tell you, because at certain times of a given business cycle, given month, pick the time period, there are what's known as surges. We have a surge here because this customer has a special need. If you're always at 98% capacity, then you flip over into, it costs too much to meet that customer's need. However, if you had a little cushion, and the normal idea behind it, according to certain operations research experts, is you want to be somewhere between 75 and 82%, somewhere in there, as you're humming along all the time. However, when you have a constraint in the game, you probably want to normally run that constraint at 90, 95%, if not 100%, given the moment and what's at stake. So a constraint runs at a much higher closer to full capacity rate than the overall system to account for surges in the real business cycle. So the rope is a signal to make sure work in process is put into the system at an appropriate time. And there are concepts like hajuka, which is a Japanese word, to organize your work, and then so standardize your work and make your work visible. These are visible cues, be it a light that turns on when the constraint has no more input. At that moment in time, somebody hits a button and the red light flashes. This happens in the Toyota production plants all the time. They call them add-on lights. And basically, this is a signal to the entire system. Stop, everybody. The constraint is out of stuff. And these kinds of signaling keeps the whole process humming. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So, don't know why I didn't have a title on this slide. Sorry about that. Lean tools support. Okay, so Lean tools support theory constraint by measuring and reducing the drum beat. So Lean is relevant to the theory constraint because it's constantly looking at reducing that cycle time. That is the mechanism by which the interaction and interplay of theory constraint deals with Lean. Lean addresses cycle time like no other method. Okay, Six Sigma tools support theory constraint and exploitation of that constraint by reducing the required buffer size. So it's going to tighten up, whether it's going to go put another machine in parallel, so that predictability of that constraint can be properly dealt with. So it deals with reducing the required buffer size. So you know exactly, I must have 10 parts in front of that unit every 20 minutes. As long as I have 10 parts in front of that unit every 20 minutes, we're humming at the best capacity rate we can. And then project management, as I mentioned earlier, is unique in the fact that theory of constraint, I'm saying, is unique to the fact that not only does it deal with operations per se, it has a particular treatment in its approach to dealing with optimizing project management methods. Okay, so how does it interact? What is flow? We talked about flow. It's a continuous, progressive, adding value in the eyes of the customer. That we know is flow. It starts at receipt of a customer request and ends when it's delivered. Right? The process in between are the things we attempt to improve. But that triggering mechanism of a request from a customer, I need this once a month, I need a delivery of 2,000 pounds, whatever. That is a triggering. When that 2,000 pounds shows up at their front door, the delivery has been made. Flow utilizes fewer numbers of steps with no interruptions. If you're making something flow well, it is the fewer number of steps with the minimal interruptions and the minimum amounts of waste. And then just so you guys can recall, and I may have said it, can't remember, the going in position. The going in position when you're taking a lean perspective on something, the assumption is there's 30% waste without me even looking. All right, that is the default position you take. That's what the experts practice. And you'd be well advised as a person, a practitioner in the manner you do organizational change management with Adizes, you'd be well advised to have an insight into what constitute a reasonable amount of waste if we're going to go in and make the world a better place. In addition to making the world a better place and a more higher levels of mutual trust and respect, let's knock out some of this waste to boot. And going in, we know 30% exists, so we'll find it somewhere. So people always working on the product and the product always being worked on. So this is the concept of lean. People are always working on the product, so they're always doing the stuff, and they're always working the product always being worked on. So that is to say, we do the work all the time, and every opportunity we get, we're going to look how we can make that better in the process. So cycle time. The time it takes, and so I don't want to go through these next two sets of slides too fast, so there's a few numbers. I'm not like a mathematician, a statistician, or anything like that, but I do want to take the time we need to make this point, because this is an important point for the TOC practices. I only see my pictures. Everybody else there? Anybody else there? Hello? Oh, okay. All right. It's good to hear from everybody every now and then.
Yeah, sorry, Dorel,
That's all right.
Eating something.
No problem.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to wear you guys out with my voice, so, But if you guys are okay, I'm okay. You guys all right?
Very good.
Okay. Very good. Keep going.
All right.
Yes.
Definitions of cycle time. Cycle time is the time it takes a product to move through a step or a process or a series of steps and process, including all the cues and the move time. I got to go from here to there. So that whole process is what we're looking at. So some of the synonyms used interchangeably based on who you're talking to. Somebody would go, oh, no. That's always flow time. Oh, no. That's always lead time or throughput time. These are synonyms. All right. So the next few slides should give you a little clarity, and you could decide, as a practitioners in a particular domain, vis-a-vis Adizes, if you want to use flow, throughput, or lead. I'm of the mind flow time gets it done for me in talking about the stuff. But you will find people using them interchangeably. So here's an example. Cycle time is the time within that process it takes that process to start and stop and be pushed on to the next process. So you see here for process step 3, you could call it, cycle time for step 3 is 5 seconds. And the P1 and P2 are 10 seconds, and P4 is 8 seconds. So total cycle time for this process is you simply add up all of the process step times. So here's a question just to see if everybody's paying attention. Where would you say, just your intuition, where would you say in this process, if cycle time is to be optimized and minimal time be taken to get the thing out the door, where would you say the constraint would be? Looking at this slide. Anybody?
P1, P2.
Exactly. P1, P2, they take the longest. And since cycle time is all about reducing the time, right off the bat, they jump out as potential constraints. Thank you. So cycle time for a process may be approximated using a term known as Little's Law, which is simply the work in process, the WIP, divided by the exit rate. That is the exit rate that, like, every 33 seconds, something's going to happen there. That's the exit rate, right? And the amount of work in process, this is a quick and dirty way of getting at that. So WIP, remember is the number of things in process at any given moment. I'm doing this. I put it over here for Vladimir to take care of, but Vladimir has 5 or 6 of these already in his inbox. So it's rather than me continually pushing work to him, some way, shape, or form, he being a constraint in that moment in time because he's got 5 things stacked up in his inbox and he still hadn't completed the one, and I'm pushing stuff down the road to him. A floater, they call it a water spider in some instances, has to come in and make sure another person now is set down beside Vladimir to make sure that bottleneck is cleared. That's the kind of idea behind this, okay? So this is borrowed from a Michael George group. Thought it was a good example to throw in here. They no longer exist, but this was taken from their stuff. It's a good explanation. So thinking about lines at Disneyland in March, which is kind of like their off season, right? Work in process, we have 5 people in the queue, okay? And the person exits that queue based on how they have designed it, 1 minute per person. That's how it goes. And in July, in the high season, 10, 12, 13 people, 15 people, every time the WIP builds up, you now have a cycle time exit rate of 1 person a minute, and your cycle time goes up simply because you have more work in process. Conclusion, fixed capacity. The exit rate is oftentimes a fixed capacity, and increasing the work in process simply will slow the cycle time. Now, this has impact in lots of things, particularly when it comes to setup, you know? And a lot of times people don't even think about setup time. They just go at it. And setup time not being considered will lead to frustration on the part of some customers, simply because you can tell a person, well, it only takes me 33 seconds to do this. Well, in fact, it took you another 5 minutes to set up before you got to the 33 seconds, which you don't count, but the customer feels. You know what I'm saying? Takt time. Takt time is a German word. Takt, anyway, the word takt came from Germany. So it's interesting. We have all these Japanese methods and techniques, but takt time actually is a German term, as I understand it. And it's the rate at which a product or service needs to be provided to meet the customer's needs. Remember when we talked in the Six Sigma portion, the upper specification limit and the lower specification limit? Essentially, we were given the parameters and the requirements that would. Are you guys okay? Is everybody there still? Ooh, what happened?
Yes, sure, Darren. Go ahead.
My thing kind of gave me some strange message. Can you guys still see the slides?
Yes.
Yeah, everything goes right.
Okay, I don't know.
Yes.
I got some strange message. Okay, all right. So takt time is a big deal. Didn't cover it in Lean. Decided to cover it here in Theory of Constraint because contextually it makes a lot of sense. So essentially, this is the customer demand signal. I want someone from Adizes in my plant 2 days a week, every other week. That's takt time. So the customer demand for a given period of time and you meeting that requirement based on the available work in a given time. If they say, I need a full-time Adizes practitioner here 2 days a week, every week, you'll look at your office and say, oh my God, everybody's already 120% committed. I'm either going to have to hire somebody or tell this customer I can't do that or something like that. So begins the thinking process to meet that need. A process sequence of steps necessary to produce a product or service in lead time, the total time from customer order to delivery of desired product or service. So let me make a distinction, you guys. About the synonyms, I mentioned I usually use the term flow time. Flow time, when you add the customer order and the delivery of that order to flow time, and that takes into account the complete time, that's what I would consider lead time, the total time, not just the flow of the process time. Does that make sense? You guys see the distinction? Don't mean to split hairs, but just trying to make sure you understand the little nuance there. So we're in all of the beginning slides. The very first slide I'll have introducing the topic. I had the little circular illustration, and it has on there DMAIC, define, measure, analyze, improve, control. This is a way of relating theory of constraint in terms of DMAIC, and DMAIC is taken from Six Sigma. It's how a Six Sigma project is defined: measured, analyzed, improved, and then controlled eventually. And remember, I always have the thought that a Six Sigma project is a bigger, heavier lift than a Kaizen event. A Kaizen event, whether you're doing 5S, whether you're working on flow, whether you're working on pull, whatever you're working on, those are measured in terms of days and weeks. A DMAIC project, where it takes a little bit more statistical analysis, I have to cover more range within the organization. I may have 2 different sites in 2 different parts of the country, or even 2 different countries. Things of that nature take on a more complicated a set of requirements. And for scoping purposes, I am still of the mind, when we're talking continuous performance improvement, even a Six Sigma project, which tends to be complicated, needs to be properly scoped. And to be properly scoped, we're talking in terms of 2, 3, 4 months, 6 months max. Now, put aside the fact that some of these techniques can be used for installing a large ERP system or some major overhaul of some IT systems in corporations. I'm not talking about projects that are so well defined and we know will take 2 years. I am talking about continuous performance improvement projects that are more complicated than a few days or weeks. Fair enough? So in terms of theory of constraint, the DMAIC system, theory of constraints would be considered, you define the goal, right? So when you identify the constraint, you're using now what phase of the DMAIC, has what phase of the Six Sigma DMAIC project approach would you say identifying the constraint resides in? Anybody want to take a guess?
Probably when you measure, Daryl, and you identify some units, some measurements of the system, and you identify the constraint.
Yes,
I would say.
Right. We use lean tools for that, and in some ways reducing it. So that's right. So some of the tools, standard work I mentioned, we did the little pig diagram. We went through that fast, but the whole point of the standard work exercise was the distinction between standard work and standard operating procedures is this. Standard operating procedure, so that answer was correct, because these are the tools during those phases. Let me go back. Okay. So I asked, what tools do you use? And I think it was Zeki who said we use the 5S, the tools of Lean. And we go here. You could use them both for exploit as well as for identify. And so the tools, 5S, which is why I inserted it in here. Standard work, and now workplace. Some of the tools you guys recall, I had that spaghetti diagram. Remember that tool from Six Sigma, I think? The circle diagram for knowledge kinds of work. We did not talk a whole lot about work setup, but we execute the changes through the Kaizen events or through the rapid improvement events. And I mentioned we could do simultaneously, once you've targeted a value stream, 5S, flow, pull in standard work. Pull being something redesigned with the idea in mind that we're not going to do anything that the customer doesn't trigger us to do. Okay. And I mean, it may seem simple on the surface. It may be over processing. It may appear to be, we're overly thinking that, but it matters. And I'll show you a little bit later in this set of slides. So I said, when we're doing process flow, you are going to have an opportunity to do the as-is map. So this is not quite an as-is map, but notice the lines are going all over the place. So before the improvement, you typically might find people running here, there, to and fro without much thought as to the layout of the thing. And like I mentioned earlier, it's real important in terms of plants and manufacturing floors. How things are laid out is really a big deal. So those were the same items on the previous slide. Physically, they could have been installed here. Inspection takes place here. You remove it here, then you come over here and you order the part, and then you go back and you solder something, you install, and so on and so forth, right? And whenever you do an as-is map, you definitely err on the side of messiness. Just so because you're trying to illustrate to someone, this shit's not good. Now, you take a little time, you think about it, and like the guy Alvaro mentioned in the movie The Founder, he was on a tennis court, and they laid out on the tennis court how things ought to be done, and explained in detail to the people who were going to be doing the work. I mean, they just stopped working and went and did all of this at this tennis court so that the employees had a clear and distinct understanding of where things will be, whether they're twisting and turning in the middle, whether they're walking one or two at a time someplace, but it's understood. Something's inducted, it's tested, it's removed, the order part is ordered, something's installed, we inspect, solder, it's tested, and then the thing is signed off. And the concept here, you guys, is known as single piece flow. I do it in my daily life. I am a person who don't believe in multitasking. You could take your philosophical leaning however you want to, but I've been indoctrinated with a lean mindset in the things I do personally. I mean, if I'm going to start a task and it hits my mind, like, I was supposed to do a spiral dynamics class, but on my mind is anything and everything I needed to do to make sure these 2-hour sessions this month were all they could be. So I just had to put that to the side, and we'll hit that first thing later today. So point being is I cannot think about the importance of delivering the Lean Six Sigma course in a synopsis way. It was a big challenge to take a week and give the most meaningful parts in 8 hours. It was a fun challenge. My point being is I couldn't get the mind space to doing 2 or 3 other things. I had to consciously say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this. And that's the whole idea in my way of saying how I personally apply single piece flow to my own work. Visual stats. I mean, life shows up. So I'm not saying that a person can't take your kids to baseball and have your job. And I don't mean to say that, but single piece flow in the context of work is a big deal. And when you design a operation, the concept in mind is one thing is going to get through here clean, real clean. So that the next thing that goes through there is going to get through there clean, real clean. And I'm going to have visual statuses along the way so everyone in the room knows what the hell is going on and what's expected of them. Okay? And the walking on the tennis court, there's no better way of explaining how that works. And oh, by the way, when you do a Kaizen event, or you do a rapid improvement event, or you do a center team type thing, that is a moment in time when you stop and work on the work itself, right? Those are important things. So here's a good example of once the work had been redesigned, okay, then you go and make it so in the real world, whether it's an office or a work cell. Now, let me point out the little light here, the andon light. What this is saying something's going on here. I need help. This workstation or this component part, whatever it is, there's help that's needed. Now, when you have maximized, or let's say optimized, the flow of the work, and you're putting into the process the exact amount of raw materials to get your finished good, be it information or some kind of material, there is a certain rate in which it's coming in based on the pull that's required of the customer. And now the idea here is that because this is so well organized, people are interchangeable, and the work is made more meaningful because of the feeling one gets at an interpersonal level on the fact I'm not only busy, I'm just not busy, I'm accomplishing something, and I have a complete understanding of what's expected of me. It's a joy. It's a joy to come to work when the situation lends itself to a human experience like that. I mentioned water spider earlier. This is a concept that supports. So this is well designed. You got 3 people who can work these 7 stations optimum. You're humming. There is a floater of a kind who may be bringing parts, who may be giving a person a break because they need to go to the restroom, whatever it is. This water spider could be a supervisor, doesn't have to be a supervisor, is a designated person with tools, materials, and equipment that is assigned to this work cell to make sure the gaps are being properly shot. Things that may go sideways can quickly be caught when an end-on light signal chimes off. The water spider can get there quickest, find out what the deal is, decide if the whole line has to stop because it's a major issue, so on and so forth. Fair enough? So one-piece flow, I mentioned it earlier, big deal. It's a big deal, The ideal state, and realizing you can't have ideal all the time. You want a small lot and you want a one-piece flowing there. Yeah, well, the world's a lot more complicated than that. But that's the philosophical standing, right? Ideal state is single-piece flow. Order enters the system, it's routed to the right person, the part is ordered, the part is sent to the customer. Information filed away. Right? Ideal. A simplification, but I think you get the point. So, you guys are, so everybody drives a car for the most part, I know. I mean, unless you live in New York, a lot of people in New York don't even know how to drive, They just take the subway and buses everywhere. But I wanted to queue up for you guys, and in the scheme of things, I didn't get a chance to. But the whole idea behind this is to point out one of the most efficient areas in which the whole concept of teamwork, flow, and everything happens are in pit crews. You get a chance, I was going to play a clip, but for the sake of time, I'll let it go. But you can look online. In fact, there are pit crew training organizations now who train members in companies, particularly manufacturers and heavy industry kinds of work. They bring their teams in and give them a day-long training on being a pit crew. And these guys can change out 4 tires, give the driver a drink, just these things I mentioned earlier. So they change 4 tires, a full tank of gas, and even give the driver a drink and a bit of a respite. And how long does it take to accomplish that? So for the average person, I go to the gas station, it could be 2 minutes. I walk inside the store while I'm getting gas to get a Gatorade. If I actually have to change tires, that's a whole nother set of hours, okay? Whereas by design in these races, these pit crews, 11 seconds, they can do.
No, actually, Daryl, with the new technologies, they brought it down to 3.5 seconds.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, 3.5 seconds.
3.5 seconds to do all of that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Except for the Gatorade part.
Well, yeah, you gotta give them time to drink it down. But no, when I last checked, it was like 10, 11, but it's 3 seconds now, huh? And it's just a good illustration of pointing that setup time reductions give you good results. So when they go through the process, and you could find 2 or 3 examples online, where when they go through the process, a lot of what they're doing is a setup before they even get to the car, right? They have things positioned. Guys jump over the wall. I don't know. Do you attend these races, Alvaro? or have you used these?
No, I like Formula One, but it actually depends a lot. I'm gonna link an article about this
Mm-hmm.
and how it explains the way, it all depends on what the rules are. It can bring the time anywhere from 3 seconds to 11 seconds.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's all about the rules because some years they allow some type of tires, some type of cars, this type of fuel, refueling once, twice per race.
Mm-hmm.
So it all depends on the rules. It can go down from 3 seconds all the way up to 12, I think.
And that's
I
a good
already
point.
linked it in the Zoom chat.
Great. Cool. Thanks. Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Which brings up, when he said rules, there are, by definition, a few default kinds of constraints. You have resource constraints, right? Whether it's the machine, the material, or whatever. These are constraints. You could be constrained by the market itself, right? And that marketplace constraint, while a tough one, nonetheless shows up for real when your plant has to operate at less than capacity, and people have to be redeployed or laid off, and so on and so forth. Those are market constraints hitting the operation. So resource constraints, there's an embargo on material X, whatever, market constraints, they're in a contracting environment, maybe a disruption in the finance market or whatever. And there are policies, what Alvaro was pointing out, said the rules can change it so that you're forced to do things in a manner of which there is only you can only pull it off in 11 seconds, no matter how good you are. Or if the rules change, vis-a-vis policies, you could do it in 3. And those are policy constraints. So those are the categories. And then there's a fourth category constraint, which we call dummy constraints, which are the easiest to address because, it's things like, okay, let's just make sure there are lights in the hallway so that people don't have to walk slower or something like that. So dummy constraints are quick fixes, what you guys call PAs. A dummy constraint is something that you address with a PA. Market constraints take a little bit more thought and action. Constraints of resources, you have to really optimize the process to make the workflow to the level of the constraint there, and so on. So those are four kinds of constraints. Just when he mentioned the rules, it made me think of the types of constraints, and those are the types: resources, market, policy, and what we call dummy constraints, things just stopping work for no good reason, which 5S addresses and a lot of other things. So setup time. Setup time connected to this whole thought of the super fast pit crews is the fact that they take a lot of conscious effort to set up where tires will be placed before the car comes in to be, dealt with, and so on. So setup time is what we're going to talk about a little bit. Lot size. Ideally, they always want to, and this is something I'm not as versed in as others, but I know that lot sizes matter and how big or small that lot size is compared to the optimum amount that ought to be more or less gone through in terms of the setup is an important idea. So in lot size, you attempt to increase the total throughput from beginning to end. Throughput is very similar to lead time. Right? So flow time I count as just the time to take to do the process. You bolt on setup and delivery, you then had lead time or a throughput time. Okay, and setup can take a long time because they're not often done enough. You might 80% of your time you're pushing product A down the line. This is the week we have to do product B. How will we do that again? And so this forget rate is high when changeover has to take place for a particular product line to be switched over to a different one. And that forget rate can be mitigated by things like, visual workspace, cues, and so on. And the cycle repeats endlessly. It's best to improve setup time first. So the takeaway is that you can improve the process, make it flow. But in theory constraint, the idea came forward that, hey, setup time and delivery time also needs to be addressed and taken, and efforts taken to make sure they are not, unnecessarily constraining the overall flow of work. Okay? So why address setup time? It improves the flow within the normal process time. It allows smaller lots. When you're doing setup time, you have these conversations about how big a lot size do we need? Do we really need that many? Yeah, well, I like that many because that's how they used to do it. Man, you know, they ask the 5 whys. Why did they like to do that? You know, well, they had a different machine back then. We've since bought the brand XB02000, which now puts shit out 5 times faster. So now we don't need to put that much of a lot in front of it because we are maximizing what this new machine can do as opposed to how the old machine runs. So those conversations are the kinds of conversations that take place when you're addressing setup time. The resource flexibility, you know, the changing out of a product line to another one in a timely manner. These are all conscious efforts in visual workspace cues and different configuration of the workforce. You know, we need to bring Sally and Joe in on this one because this is their thing. They do it all the time, and they do it in plant A, B, or C, and next week they're going to be here with us. So all those kinds of considerations go on a conscious level to make sure setup is not introducing unnecessary non-value variation. And ways to streamline the setup, eliminate, combine, resequence the work, put things in parallel, fix settings, eliminate adjustments. You go through a thoughtful effort, and a checklist probably would be ideal for streamlining setup. Setup for product A, flipped it over, setup for product B, go, right? But a little time and effort for that. I won't belabor the fact that the adjusting the lot size. One thing that's important to point out here, implementing is when you're attempting to tighten up your setup and lot sizes, you might want to pilot that to make sure your assumptions about optimization are proven out. So you actually run it, test it a little bit. I'm going to skip these next two. They're pretty wordy, but you can look at them. Essentially, what we're saying here is this whole concept of lead time. You know, it's lead time is generally waste. It's always waste. But when you're trying to minimize constraints and optimize setup times, in those cases, a little whip is necessary. So it's the counter to the general rule. Okay, so to answer the question, what is the optimum lot size? You have to do what's called balance the cost of adding 1 or 2 more items to the list, and without doing some type of cost-benefit analysis to see is it really worth it, you may not know what's going on. And I mentioned the concept of TAC earlier. So cost-benefit analysis, this third bullet, the last sentence in this third bullet. So cost-benefit analysis is often required, but cost-benefit analysis can only be applied accurately if you first understand the TAC time, your setup time, and proper lot size. Then that, in essence, contrasted with whatever process constraint you have, you now can play what-if scenarios and do sensibility testing as to your underlying assumptions to make the work flow. Make sense, you guys?
Yes, Cyril.
Any questions?
Yeah. I'm catching these at a very conceptual level. I mean, the details I'll go through because but the concept level, yeah, I can understand. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so how do we measure the success of the looking at these things? So let me go back real quick. Okay, I need to move something. Hold on. Should have said exploiting the constraint. How do we measure the success of exploiting the constraint? I don't know what happened to the word there, but all right. So in the lean lexicon, we compare cycle time against takt time, right? Takt time being the demand signal from the customer. So if our cycle time falls within the demand specification, we're okay. If it falls without, we have problems. In the top theory constraint lexicon, we see whether reduce the work in process or decreasing the cycle time of the constraints. In lean terminology, we want to compare cycle time against TAT, meaning we compare the process steps that we're actually doing against what the customer is expecting. If what we're actually doing meets that customer expectation, great. And in the theory constraint lexicon, we want to see whether we reduce the work in process or decrease the cycle time of the constraint. So if either we can reduce the work in process because the constraint is slowing us up, or reduce the cycle time, decrease the cycle time, we have done ourselves a favor trying to optimize the process. So here's a little exercise, and there'll be a few numbers, but it's really not much because I'm really not into numbers. I am, but then I'm not, you know. So, but we can't get away from theory constraint without a little treatment of this. So now I'm going to ask you guys to kind of help me out, and let's all pay attention to this. If I do or say something wrong, please stop me and point it out. So a customer needs 25 units in 15 minutes, okay? So that equates to 900 seconds, all right, in terms of units. The order entry takes 75 seconds. Order entry now is a setup, right? That's a setup. We just talked about setup for 4 or 5 slides. That's a setup time. And the delivery takes 600 seconds. So first question, when we say setup and we say delivery, okay, see if you guys have been listening because I've been talking a lot. Our setup time or order entry time and delivery time, are they by definition part of the flow in the way I've talked about it? What would you say? No? Yes?
I would say yes.
Huh? No. All right.
That
So,
would be slow.
huh?
I would say no.
You're right. Why would you say no?
Mm,
No is correct. Why would you say
Because these actions do not add value to the customer.
right? I mean, they're outside our defined space of process that's adding value. Okay, it's them just ordering it, and so the setup time. But here's the thing: at the end of the day, it's going to affect things. We don't normally speak to setup time and delivery time when we talk about value added flow, but they're there nonetheless. They are there. So the available time for us has to be looked at like this. We have a customer needs this 25 units in 15 minutes, and that equates to 900 seconds. However, although we don't talk about value added, non-value added for flow, the reality is we need to consider setup time and delivery time in our strategy. So we need to look at the available time as discounted by the setup and the delivery time, because that's the total time. That's total throughput or lead time, right? And I'm sorry for, getting so specific about the terminology. Flow relates to P1, P2, P3, P4, as Vladimir said. Setup time and delivery time, which kind of like are out of bounds for our process improvement initiative, nonetheless, they must be accounted for and discounted when the customer is looking at getting their 25 units, okay? So here's what we look at. We look at the fact that we are discounted the total available time, which includes the process time, P1, 2, and 3, and 4, as well as the setup and delivery time, which are 75 seconds and 600 seconds. So we look at the 225 seconds available, divide by the 25 units, and we see we need to be putting out a unit every 9 seconds. Fair enough? Right? You guys see that, right?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So now, cycle time. Cycle time, we go back to simply our process we are always seeking to improve. Our process cycle time is 33 seconds. Okay, that's a fact. Our lead time, this is the interesting formula here. The lead time takes into account that the first unit is going to go off the line in a manner of speaking, having already accounted for the 75-second setup. We don't have to do a setup each time because the lot is 25. We have a lot of 25 units here, right? But the lead time is only accounted for the one time to set it up, and then we start to roll. Thus, you'll see first, we're going to add the 33. We'll do the basic math, 24 times 10, it gives us a number. You add 33 to that, and then you add 75 seconds to that, and you add all that to 600 seconds. And in total, rather than 900 seconds, we see now when we account for the setup time and the delivery time, we actually are going to exceed the amount of time we're going to experience this. We are 48 seconds above the 900 seconds requirements. So customer's not going to be happy. Fair enough? You guys see that? After we look at all the things we can do with our capacity, the 33 seconds, the setup time, and the delivery time, we add all that up, we're 48 seconds above what the customer really wants. And we said earlier, I got to move this thing from my screen. You said earlier that the constraint was P1 and 2, and they both exceed the takt time of 9 seconds because both of them are 10. So our average time on this one is really 10 seconds. So the capability of this process in total is beyond the takt time, and takt time equals the demand signal from the customer. The customer wants one of these every 9 seconds if you're going to meet my requirement. Damn, I'm close, because our average is 10 seconds. If I could find the constraint and exploit it, I might be able to buy myself some capacity. You guys see that? All right.
Yeah, very good example.
They're good? Okay, great. So that being the case, we're still not out of the woods yet because variation happens, right? And the deal is with this is cycle time. I'm moving my pictures around here. I don't know how to shut that off. Yeah. So we're not quite there yet because variation happens. We generally can't look like we got a little constraint. Well, in fact, what we need to look at is this. Variation happens. So there are some cases in which the process could be plus or minus 1, 2, or 3. Now you look at this and you'll see for what was previously obviously the constraint, P1, process 1, actually had some variation inherent in it, plus or minus 1 point. So you could have it be 11 seconds or 9 seconds. And in process 2, you had variations plus or minus 3, which meant it could be either 13 seconds or 7 seconds based on what was going on. These would be system variations, right? This is not special cause problems. This is just inherent in the system, this level of variation. And you look at what was P3 is plus or minus 2. But what's interesting about this one is P4, which was not the constraint previously, the variation in it takes it up to being 14 seconds, which at the end of the day, we take our basic 33-second cycle time, account for the variation plus or minus 12 seconds, we're saying we could be somewhere in the cycle time varying somewhere between 21 seconds and 45 seconds, right? So our numbers we calculated previously, where we just had a constraint of 1 point off of the mark, looks different now, right? So P1 and 2 could be constraints. It's true still, because P3 is still not in the mix to being a constraint. Potentially, if P4 and P2 were lower in general, P1 could be the constraint. So now we have 3 potential constraints when we account for the variation inherent in the system, right? And so the average exit time, we could hit the takt time of 9, but we have no way of really predicting that because of the variation inherent in the system. So how do you use lean to make the system go at the speed of the constraint, right? Which is to say, how do we subordinate it, you know? And here are some tools I mentioned earlier, and I won't belabor it so much because that was hopefully that illustration made it clear to you guys that, you know, there are ways in which this interplay between lean, theory, constraint, and Six Sigma can actually work. I played the Lucy video earlier, and this is just an illustration of that. Takt time. So even distribution of work to meet takt time, especially for different products and services. When you say determine the pitch of each product, that is how many seconds behind the other product is the second one coming on down the road. So Hajunka box is a schedule of work that includes what and when things need to arrive, and there are examples of this. These are tools used in the workspace. And let me get to this picture here. So here's a takt time kind of illustration to bring it home one more time for you guys. Here, the takt time, we're saying the customer needs something every 65 seconds. Operator A has got some work, B, C, D, they all got work. These guys don't have a problem. The effective utilization, in fact, for these folks can be bumped up. We have to do something to deal with this constraint. Operator A is just not hitting the mark, and we'll take our deliverable potentially off target. Okay, so you could rebalance the work by saying, hey, operator B and C, we're going to give you more things to do. Okay, in fact, we can let operator E go someplace else because having rebalanced this work to meet the customer takt time, we see an improvement overall in our cycle time. Not only do we see improvement in our cycle time, we see people available to be redeployed and even have additional capacity, like in the case of operator D, he or she could do a lot more. This workload leveling is a big idea. We worked hard at making sure people had good, meaningful work, and were always being challenged because the flow of work from a person's point of view is as important an idea as the flow of work as a process of service in general. Okay. Staffing levels is what we would normally do a 45-minute takt time exercise. We won't bother with that. So standard work, some of the tools we mentioned earlier, all these show up here. Workload balancing, the Hajuka. One thing I said about Combine, I went over it fast. Let me go back because there's a good example. Combine, signal to move work. So one good example somebody was telling me is, you know, when you go to a Japanese restaurant, the sushi menu is a great illustration of the signals to make work flow, right? The signal to move work. A waitress at any restaurant can stand up and ask you what you want, this, that, and the other thing. With sushi restaurants, they have sort of standardized the idea of a Kanban by simply giving you an illustrated menu where you could check off on the box the kind of sushis you want. And I thought that was a good example of a Kanban. So Hajuka and Kanban have real relevance in a workspace environment. The visual workspace, the workspace is informing people what's going on. I mentioned push-pull. You always want to err on the side of a customer-driven system and things being pulled from upstream, right? No one downstream, no one upstream produces a good or service until the downstream customer asks for it. So basically,
Daryl, may I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just got some amazing news. My wife is pregnant again.
Oh, congratulations, man. I mean,
just in the middle of the meeting.
Is that right?
Yeah, congrats, man.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
How many?
Congratulations, Alvaro.
This is going to be the third one.
Oh, congratulations, man.
Oh, great.
Very good, above the average.
That was lean.
That was
So this is lean manufacturing, Daryl, at its best.
the best kind. That's great. That's great, Alvaro. Yeah, no, I think, guys, well, this pretty much covers it. I mean, I could lecture you a little bit more, but I think these are the main points. And what I wanted to do, pull is preferred over push. I think that's a general thought. What I wanted to do, how much time do we have left? What time is it? I don't have my, wow.
35 minutes.
Okay. So I wanted to take the last 35 minutes and see, here's some examples, you guys. I mean, I could talk some more on Kanbans and Hajuka. The takeaway is have the workplace inform you. Make the workplace as informative as possible with lights and containers and like blocking off where this unit should go all the time and informative information cards. And so that's really was those last 4 or 5 slides that you could take a look at on your own. And the wrap up the theory of constraint piece, the idea is you go through, identify the constraint, exploit it, use some tools to subordinate it and deal with it in a positive way so that it's optimized. And then you evaluate if your way and means of addressing the constraint had the right and expected effect you had hoped for. When that happens, you can rest assured another constraint is going to pop up, and then you go through the cycle again. I mean, that's essentially what theory of constraints is saying. Now, this last slide here I put up, it says, evaluating the constraint usually requires time and resources. This is primarily a black belt territory. Or you could say this is something in which the Adizes consultant is capable of dealing with. I mean, because, it's something that's so commonsensical at some point, when you step away and you look at the problem. A person could be trained in theory of constraint, could be trained in Lean Six Sigma or Lean or Six Sigma, or pick the methodology of the day. And I respect all methodologies, trust me. But the point of this saying this is primarily black belt territory, saying we need somebody who's got critical thinking capability to go through the wickets and the techniques one ought to go through to properly determine if a constraint exists. If it does, how do you exploit it? Which tools do you pull off the shelf to use to address it? So on and so forth. And I certainly don't mean to minimize it. I mean, people can go, just like we go to classes on a lot of different things. I mean, people spend their life just delving and becoming an expert in theory of constraint. What I wanted to do, I sent you another set of slides, you guys, and I may not have the time to go through it. Let me just look at this. Okay, I think we're done with that. We may not get a chance to go through all the other slides, but let me just highlight for you one thing before I leave you. Okay. You guys still see me?
We see you.
Okay. I'm going to show you, and I'm going to send this to you guys. Now, and I, from time to time, I'll do a lecture on the Adizes around town here, right? But the one thing I never really show is the tip attribution map, because I was indoctrinated with the fact that is really a very special tool. When you put up that attribution map, people go, I see now. And so, do you see this? It's not, I haven't shared this yet. Hold on. All right, I gotta remember how to share something. All right, share screen. Okay, I want to share this. Can you guys see that?
Now I can see.
Can you see it? Okay. I'm going to try to make it a little bit bigger. Maybe this is too big. That was too big. Hold on. Okay. All right. This is big enough. You guys can see that, right?
Yep.
Okay. What this is, I've sanitized it. These numbers were from an organization that I had been working with. So I did this at my organization at another one as well. And so essentially, when I thought about, well, how do you control? What would I talk about for control? And that two things came to mind. One, I wanted to give you guys a set of slides that was a different synopsis than the first overview. So I gave you in the first session an overview of Lean Six Sigma, including theory of constraint. And then we did a bit of a deep dive into Lean, focusing on flow. We did a bit of a deep dive into Six Sigma, focusing on variation and how to eliminate it. And we did a little bit of a deep dive in theory of constraint and looking at setup times and the difference between flow time, lead time. Lead time is the same as throughput time, so on and so forth. So I was left with, okay, what do I talk about for control, or should I give these guys a synopsis of everything? And here's what I decided. I decided to share with you one of the best tools in my whole view of my experience implementing Lean. And it is essentially the model that is used from the beginning to the end. And here's how it works. It's an active Excel spreadsheet. You can play around with it when you get a chance. But essentially, the model says this. I always thought it was useful. The model says you have a population. You want to use Lean as a managerial philosophy to help improve processes in your organization. Okay, so there's a change pace in which you seek to experience. And this is, by the way, this is a model based on best practices beyond companies. This was used by a company called Simplar. Simplar, Best Corp, a number of the larger Lean companies use this model. Simplar tried to tell folks, oh, this is our model, you stole it, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, it became a public thing, you know? And so a lot of different Lean companies use this model, okay? So I know the origins of it, and I know 4 or 5 other companies who use it. So we are not in any big violation, me giving you this. I have removed the names, but wanted you to appreciate the construct. Population year 1, the rate of change you determine you want to have experience. The number of teams you ought to launch in which to ensure you are going to experience the type of change you expect. The rapid improvement events per year. So this group here, when they say this first year, they've stood up a number of teams. But notice the rapid improvement events per year are really not that many, right? Then they determine out of 700 people, they wanted essentially 1%. So these numbers may be off a little bit. Essentially, if you have 1,000 people, you want 1% of those 1,000 people to be full-time change agents doing Lean or whatever your thing is. So 1% of 700, 7, I guess, right? 10% would be 70. So they're about right. 7. Okay. You have part-time people. Now this would be folks who, in addition to full-time deployment, there were a number of folks you had that you wanted to be part-time. Now, the sensei ratio, this is the ratio of experts to people doing some of the work. And I always thought this was useful for me. So project return on investment. So here's the formula they use, okay? Basically, when I mentioned to you earlier that a rapid improvement event, when they go into an organization and target it, they generally would stand up 4 teams. A 5S team to address making things clean, making sure everything is in its place, and so on and so forth. Simplest implementation of a Kaizen. A standard work thing. Where are all our documents? Do people have the requisite information, the training, and are these instructions visual? And in every instance, done in simple language so the people doing the work are clear on what is expected of them. Take time and improve upon standard work. Take time, improve upon 5S, visual workspace. Flow, take time, understand the flow of the work in this value stream. Okay, probably one of the heavier lifts. And then the fourth one that was always what we just covered, theory of constraint, was are we meeting the work balancing requirements? Do we have the proper tack time identified? Do we even know what the demand is from the customer? Have we heard directly from the customer that they expect 18 hours of work, if it's a service, or 25,000 parts if it's parts or something? Understanding the pull idea. So that's a purist point of view, right? I'm going to do a rapid improvement event or Kaizen. There will be 4 areas addressed on this one value stream. We're going to make the workflow and make sure it's only value added, and we'll eliminate the waste whenever we can. We're going to clean this place up, make sure it's representative of what a lean operation ought to look like and be experienced in terms of visual aids and so on and so forth. We're going to make sure that the work is being pulled by the customer in a timely manner, responded to by those doing the work, and we're going to document and standardize things. Now, here's the idea. There is money spent when a team ensues engaging in these activities, and we quantify that. So teams per rapid improvement event, I mentioned the 4 teams. Those are the 4 types of teams. The normal attrition rate was accounted for in terms of people available to be on teams and so on and so forth. There was a return on investment that was something that in my organization, you had to, on your charter, recommend, ideally, if we pull this thing off, we see benefits, and we had to track benefits. So I'm going to send you guys this lean deployment model. And I just think it has good elements of, if you're going to do a process, it ought to have these attributes.
Cool.
All right.
Darrell, I just want to point that for being able to use this kind of measurements, you need to calculate the savings or the return on investment that you got from all your efforts. Doesn't matter if it's Six Sigma, senior teams, etc. Mm-hmm. And in my point of view, this is one of the most important decisions that a continuous improvement initiative have to take, because for sure you require knowledge and people who can calculate this money. Mm-hmm. And but at the end gives you, probably in my opinion, the most important motivation for continue doing these things, because you reflect all the effort you put in the system, and you got your result. I mean, and
yes,
it's a very important thing.
It was, for us, it was very important. In fact, I had to work to make sure people got it, that it wasn't the only thing we were interested in. So, but for my leadership, it was, yes, I completely agree. Now, how you account for that, what I used was activity-based costing, and I could use effective utilization rate calculations. And so we worked hand in hand with the comptroller's office to first baseline a metric. So we would look at a process. We would say there's 20 people in this process in a given period of time. So we've always decided we're going to look at this process from beginning to end. This process will take 20 people. And so we knew the full-time equivalent hours, and we knew what we were charging customers for things. And so we could step back and, in the Kaizen event, have a conversation immediately on the heels of putting the charter in place. On the charter, I can't remember if on the charter we actually declared potential cost savings, or if it was done at the end of the process improvement initiative, okay, in terms of a projection. And then we had the requirement, and I didn't show you the control charts, but I'll try to dig up and send you a couple of artifacts that reflected how we track savings. And we had categories of savings, a cost reduction we had. We could redeploy people to another work area. We had two types of cost savings. We had cost avoidance. Okay, if you do this process, you will avoid these potential cost increase. And we had hard cost savings. You do these things like this, you will put some money back in the pockets of someone, a customer or the department or whatever. So we had cost avoidance was a category, cost savings was a category, and we had what we called quality of life, where you do these things, people are just going to be happier coming to work. You may not have a cost savings. We called it intangibles. So we had the intangible, we had the cost avoidance, which were hard savings of a kind, because those were budget items that didn't need to be realized in the future. And then we had hard cost savings. That meant I put money back in the pockets of some decision maker, some customer, that very instance. And so we had a rigorous approach to controlling results post-event. So once the event had completed, we would take that and then go forward. I must have made some marks on here somehow. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, I thought this was very useful. And on every rapid improvement team, we had a baseline that, for the investment we would make, we wanted a 3-to-1. I mean, it's not on here for some reason, but if we spent, in terms of man hours, you take 10 people offline for 3 days, count it up, based on their level of pay and so on and so forth, we knew the number of what the company was investing in to take these 10 people and put them in a Kaizen event. The expected outcome was when they come back, the value proposition and changing things would be something on the order of 3-to-1. So, Shredar, are you doing this? What is that? Who's that? Somebody's very skilled at this stuff. Right? Any questions on this, you guys?
Not on this spreadsheet, but I have a question in general regarding the wall material we had covered. Mm-hmm. May I express it now, or you have to cover something else?
No. Express it now. This is the time to express it.
Because the way I see to utilize all these materials we've been through is to actually use those in senior teams. And the way to use it is a question of mine, because this material we've been through, it's a kind of a lot of terms and definitions and understanding of what is what. Mm-hmm. So would you suggest to have kind of similar sessions with a client or a customer, so that we all the group has the same understanding on what is the takt time, what is the flow, what is the cycle time, so that if we have this understanding, then we can both or all together put some effort into improving things the way they are at the client side. Would you suggest to have like this 8 hours of lecturing with them, or maybe less or more?
So let me make sure I got your question, Vladimir. It's essentially you're saying, is it useful to maybe indoctrinate your client with some of these ideas and concepts? So let me just think out loud. So if a center team engages, I take it when you guys launch a center team, you give a just-in-time overview of the Lean, of the Adizes methodology. A 1 hour, here's Adizes, here's what we're doing, here's what your role is going to be on the center team. I take it that happens, right?
Yeah, it's like 5 minutes usually.
Okay, all right. So here's what I would say to your question on how you would integrate this into a center team practice. Look at the nature of the center team. What are they attempting to do? Is what they're dealing with a problem of eliminating waste? Is what they're dealing with a problem of constraints? Do they have a lack of resources? Has the market changed and changed the scope of what they can do? Are there just like in a quandary about how things get done and lost key people and so on and so forth. So I guess it depends on the nature of the center team. But what I would do, I wouldn't take 8 hours, of course, and do that. But you would have to make a determination and say to yourself categorically in your own mind, what is the nature of this problem? And then, you go about the task of doing your center team work, whatever your goals are. I don't know. I mean, I'd like to hear other folks. So I wouldn't necessarily try to indoctrinate them with all of these things. I have an idea that I could certainly, with an Adizes practitioner, we use as a sounding board to say, well, that sounds like a lean problem. Oh, that sounds like a theory constraint opportunity or something like that. And you just sort of season your center team work in a natural way with some of these ideas. They don't have to become a lean conversant, a lean, I won't say expert. They don't have to even know that it's lean. These should be considered by lean practitioner as additional tools as you listen to the center team deliberations. You go, hey, you know what? Here's a thought, you guys. And you go to the board and you say, let's put up the process steps. Right? They don't need to know that that's lean. They just need to know, oh, my Adizes practitioner and the center team said, look, let's try this. Let's try to flow this process out. Where's the value in this? And so I would say do it in a natural way. And I have ways and ideas on how to do that, That's a good question. Anybody else have a response?
I want to make a comment here. Okay. I mean, this is intense, if you go lean, Six Sigma, they're quite intense. One is, I foresee that, the first comment, a lot of this is applicable at the state of $1 of a company, because till the time you are in go, you are doing various things in a very random way to increase efficiency. In adolescence, right in the middle of this, all this will make a lot of sense, and that's where probably the company itself may have internal influence, which is expertise. Maybe get trained in Six Sigma, in Lean, while our efforts come in to integrate them. Over a period of time, maybe internally in the Adizes Institute, we may have trained who could actually sort of adolescents deliver certain things which were there, which are needed, and then exit. It's so. This is how I can see this, but let's see. I mean, this is just a comment, I think.
No, I think that's a good comment. If I heard you correctly, the comment is these kinds of tools are very useful for an organization that's in adolescence or older, or along the organizational life cycle. And I see that as true. So if a company has 400 people, I put it like this. When a company begins to approach having 50 to 60 people, these tools become useful, in my opinion, regardless of where they might be on the life cycle. The mere fact that 50 different individuals are attempting to do something, let's say they're the best at doing whatever that is there value in having them pulled offline and go through some center team effort? I think it is. Could you, in that center team effort, include concepts, ideas, and insights from Lean, Theory Constraint, Six Sigma? Yes. But it takes, in my opinion, an open mind and a trained person who's just generally aware of it. The Adizes methodology is complete and full, in my opinion. And my demarcation in thinking about these things is, if I have 50 people in the company, there's an opportunity for a center team to add value to make it a better place. I don't care how good they are. There could be improvement. And when you start having that many people, it's useful to begin to think about any of these tools, in my opinion. But certainly for an adolescent organization or older, absolutely, they would see this as gospel. It'd be like, amen, yes, we none know how this process is working and shit, he says it's this way, I say it's that way. We're both right, but now when do we ever get a chance to talk about that for real, the real problem? When do we really get the chance to talk about the real problem? You know, and so whatever tool you have to pull out of your, you know, toolbox to make it work. The good news is there is in the Adizes methodology a total approach that I believe is useful and open enough. I can season with this, I can season with that. And I mean, that's just the way I see it, you guys, you know. I don't know. But yeah, I generally agree with that thought straight off. Any other comments?
So may wrap up how I understand the answer to my question. So I agree with you, Daryl, because I recently had the same experience like this Friday. Mm-hmm. So that should be happening naturally. We shouldn't lecture them on some theoretical stuff and don't know when it would be useful.
Right.
But if in a senior team we have an issue with something that we feel it's could be solved by one of the tools which we had an overview today and 3 days before, then we should use them.
Yes.
But for that we need to put additional time to really understand first and then be able to explain these concepts to someone else. So it's a little bit higher level of understanding than we have now.
Yes.
So
yes.
We certainly need to invest more time into looking at all these materials and think through how would I explain to someone else and when it would be applicable.
Mm-hmm.
And when the level of understanding for me would be this good, and I would be able to really help and like on a flip chart draw like a process or a concept that would be useful. Because my experience this Friday was that people had a conflict of definition. What is a process? And a process is like, you know, planning, executing, monitoring, and then evaluating. And they misunderstood which part of this process they want to improve. And we just draw this picture of a process 4 boxes, and we've like synchronized, integrated on a subject, and then we were able to move forward much rapidly. In the same way, we could use all these tools that we have now in our like inventory. So thank you.
Yeah. I consider it natural, and you know, and I thought about it. I thought, you know, if anybody wants to start integrating it, I'm certainly open to helping out. But then it's just like that. I mean, let's just get, you know, and I just think back to we had Clark Wigley work with us for a number of years, and it was interesting because although he was using the Adizes methodology, he never made us all talk like Adizes, you know. And I used to be the one frustrated with that. Can't we use POC? Can't we use these terms? It's not a big thing with him. But yet the effectiveness was still there. If that makes sense, you know. But no, that's the only way to approach it. And having been exposed to the tools, it'll trigger something in your mind. And I say, always go with your intuition. That sounds a lot like variation. What can we do with that? Or you say to yourself, this is a project, you guys. We're going to need to make sure we scope this properly. Go back and tighten up that charter for that center team. Go back and negotiate with the POC as to the complexity based on the people who were assigned the center team. And here's the thing I would tell you, and I don't know how everybody, when center teams are formulated, I don't know what rationale every office uses or company use to do that. But one of the key tenets that I believe is paramount, very important with Lean that I thought, and this was taught to me by a whole nother person, not the folks that came in and worked it with us. I actually went out and got training from 2-3 different people. So I had multiple perspectives on it. But I got information from one woman who drove into me. She beat it into me, and I now believe this. In order for a center team, a Kaizen team, a rapid improvement event team to be effective, the over 50% of that team must be the people who do that actual work. You can't have two administrators from outside the organization, some other person observing from someplace else, the comptroller. If you have 8 people on a team and they're looking at a particular problem, these 8 people ought to be the ones that are up at night dealing with that problem in a real way. You know, it's bugging them. Those are the people you must have in the team. So she would always say, people who do the work need to be on these teams. Not, you know, I mean, you could have 1 or 2 outsiders, but you want to have a quorum of the people who actually do the work on these teams. Does that make sense? Is that how you guys approach set up center team?
No, absolutely. Implementer is one, administrator is anywhere a resource, and the remaining are resources. There's only one person who is an integrator. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a concept.
I think we have 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Yeah. We have 3 minutes just for information, so we could.
Yeah.
All right, so we can wrap up. Go ahead, Vladimir. You had one last comment. Go ahead.
No, just I want to say that this 50% is a number representation of a CAPI concept that we have. Because as I said,
that's right.
we usually have even more than 50%.
Great. Yeah, that's right. All right.
Okay. Should we? Yeah. Any comment from anyone before we reinforce?
I just, before ending the session, I just want to tell you a recent experience that I had with a client who were trying to use Six Sigma instead of a senior team to solve a quality issue in his plant. And by working with the POC sessions, they decided to open a senior team, but the implementer decided to also use Six Sigma tools to define or to identify the root causes of the problem, right? So on the first session, we have to make some arrangements to do some kind of conclusion of how we will be able to manage the sessions in a different way than a regular senior team or a regular Six Sigma project. And we conclude that we will only be able to use Six Sigma tools to analyze the information, but everything else remains as a senior team, as we all know. So it was particularly useful for us to make a good analysis of the information, and people get used to be in a senior team with senior team rules and bring all the information in a Six Sigma way. So it is possible to mix these two methodologies or any of these methodologies with these Adizes tools, but we only need to be sure that we know that the methodology, I mean the other methodology, Sigma or whatever, and maybe in the first session or before the first session, make all the arrangement with the implementer to be sure that they will feel comfortable with the mix, and for sure you need to show some knowledge of the methodology that you wanna mix, and everything will be okay. So I just want to share this recent experience with you, and be sure that we have a lot of opportunities mixing these things, and I also will be very, very interested to see if any of you have any experiences with this, and participate with you with this.
It's great. Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, so should we? No, that's great. I appreciate that.
So should we reinforce now? Yeah. Should we reinforce? Maybe I can start. I'm feeling good. I was feeling a little, what do you call it? Not disturbed, a little nervous in the middle because I was made to go back to details. My style is a lot of PE and this is a lot of case stuff, you know. But I'm feeling good right now because what I realized is it's not so much to actually take these small nuts and bolts and deliver it to the companies, the clients whom we work with. But it is all about knowing intelligently how, to assimilate some of these concepts, understand their relevance in the entire scheme of things. And so when we deliver, we are able to talk intelligently and use these concepts, make them work, and I realize that we are in a compilation and deliberation phase as of now, and that deliberation is really causing this noise within me. But after I incubate over this weekend, some illuminations will come, So I'm lazy guy, right? I'm going to use people who can actually deliver some of these. I think I can manage that. But very important to know these concepts. Otherwise, we get lost. If it's a higher dollars company and they're talking about these concepts, or if there's an expert within that company, we get lost. So if you know these concepts, we can actually play around. We can take the higher ground and make them work for us. Wonderful. So great. I like it. I like today's session. But I think Monday morning is when I'll get my illuminations. Yeah, Vladimir, I pass it to you.
Oh, thanks, sir. So, really nice tools. Great. I kind of said my reinforcement again that I see that it's useful. Of course, we need to look deeper into these tools, and of course, the idea to bring someone who is more expert in these also valuable. Looking forward to invest more time, maybe some next 3 or 4 Saturdays to look into these concepts more and to try to map what would be the reasons and the problems for which and which tools to use, and look more into those tools and how I would present them to the client, and then it always comes naturally from the group how we use it. So thank you, Daryl. Who's next on the line?
Can I? Okay.
Seiko.
It was an overall picture, helicopter view on this topic, and after that we are not green or black belt people, and we are not professionals in that. Probably we are now more ready to integrate our senior teams with tasks to improve some processes, and in column 4 or 5, or integrate teams with people who are experienced in Lean and Kaizen to better understand them. I'm satisfied with this course, and thank you guys. Thank you, Daryl. Jacinto.
Well, it was a very good opportunity, Daryl, and everybody to start looking at these methodologies and trying to use this opportunity in with our clients. Hopefully, it's only the first trial, and we will continue going deeper in how to use these methodologies all together, and feel very enthusiastic about this, and happy to also to share a little bit of these experiences, and insist I'm available to talk about this whatever you need. Darrell?
Well, did you say me or Alvaro? Is he still on?
Oh, I don't see him in the list.
Okay. Well, first off, I so appreciate you guys taking your Saturdays to do this with me and the rest of the folks. You'll be receiving a certificate, although you might not be a black belt or a green belt. Here's what you could feel assured about. I pulled from a green belt course, which is a 40-hour course, the nuggets that I thought you would be able to grasp. So it's not like you got the most basic stuff. I came in at a higher level, giving you credit for, as change methodologist already, be able to appreciate that. So that's why I use the term. It's not green belt, black belt. It's a mixed martial art. It's a
We are white belt.
right. So yeah, we're ninjas.
All black.
Yes, that's
Or,
right.
or Kung Fu Panda, at least, or something like that.
Huh? So yeah, I'm branded. Yeah, that's it, branded. So but you guys will get a certificate. And for everybody in the class, you know, I feel the need to give you a couple of more hours of coaching, whether it's a client like Lucinto or Vladimir had mentioned. You know, the people who participate in this class, I think a value-added thing for you as well as for myself is I had a mentoring program that I did with the Marine Corps. And what I realized was after something like this, there are lingering questions of a particular kind that a person have individually. So I offer you guys at least, you know, there's no cost to this. I'm just saying for this class, the people who honored, you know, coming this, I'm very appreciative of it. And if you had, you know, any questions, I give you another couple of hours of coaching individually, and then it's a wrap. And you'll get your certificate of mixed methodology of applications as a certified Adizes practitioner. And that, along with a little coaching, I'm hoping will give you enough confidence to be comfortable, in doing your thing. It'll be fine. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate the time.
Just one request. Would there be a glossary of all the terms that we use in all these team methods?
No,
that would be the real
glossary. No. Yeah. I give you that.
Okay. The tag time and cycle time and
Okay.
all of that.
I have a book of knowledge. I'll send you the book of knowledge, and I'll highlight in that book of knowledge the things we covered. Okay.
Okay.
Give me a few days. I'd rather just do coaching rather than to write a document. But I'll take one of my old documents. I'll take one of my old documents and I'll highlight things we covered. And then you'll see it actually in context of all the other terminology. I think I have that straight up. All right?
Great.
Okay.
So give me a few days. I'll get the certificates out. And, thank you guys so much. Congratulations.
Congratulations, guys.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Goodbye.
All right.
Good night. Good night from here.